I've been making videos recently talking about emulation hardware and stuff, and one of my original videos that really blew up was turning an Android phone and putting a, USB-C controller onto it and sort of seeing how well that experience was and trying to be as like a budget-conscious way to play GameCube and PS2 games really well. And I thought, why not take this time and revisit that concept? Because there's been a lot of changes. There's been multiple phone releases since then that radically changes either the used market or what phones people currently have, and really start to reevaluate that sort of experience. So for this video, I'm going to be using a Samsung Galaxy S10e and a GameSir X2 USB-C controller. I am going to be reusing these from the last time I did this test, but later in the video I'll give some more up-to-date and personal recommendations for newer generation devices that you might want to use instead if you want to go down this route. To give you a sort of mini review of this controller, it's not the greatest controller I ever used. It is very affordable though, starting at $32, at least at the time I purchased it, which was on sale, and I'm pretty sure the prices have gone up by now. I'll have a displayed picture of that, what it is at now, because at time of recording I don't have that information on my hand right now. But the actual controller isn't fine. It's, a cheap controller. It's really nice for it to be hardwired in, to have like a charging pass-through in it, and the analog sticks are kind of small, but overall it is a very compact and, nice enough controller for how much you spent on it. The Galaxy S10e, though, is a pretty good deal. Back in the day, I got mine for about $120 off of Amazon, but nowadays you get them for about $100 used on eBay, which is, if you're buying a device specifically for this, is probably the place I would go to do this. For the initial setup, I had to install every emulator separately because when I was initially doing the prep work for this video, I didn't know Emulation Station and EmuDeck had, betas available for you to use these on Android now, which is an amazing thing for the community to have finally access to on Android devices because it drastically simplifies the setup process for these Android devices. Right now, there's only a certain list of supported devices, but as time goes on, the list will grow, and it'll be super easy to install and set up your emulators for your Android devices. Right now, I think it's a small list that's supported devices like the Retro Pocket 3 Plus, a couple Anbernic devices, and a few phones, but that list is growing quite frequently, and you can just install it on any device and see if it works at all. But after installing all the emulators individually and then individually setting them up, what kind of performance should you expect? Well, with my S10e, I'm able to play all the way up until Switch games, which has this chip with a Snapdragon 835, which is sort of the bare minimum of what you need to emulate Nintendo Switch games. So, while not being the highest performing chip you could probably get nowadays, especially if you buy something like an Odin, even an Odin 1 or an Odin 2 would drastically be better than what this device has. And having this sort of level of performance does allow you, though, to play basically seamless GameCube and PS2 at 2x resolution. Being able to play Nintendo Switch games is possible, like I said, with this chip, but not every game would run particularly great, and you might have to run into some battery issues, because I noticed when attempting to emulate GameCube and PS2 at 2x native resolution, I did see a drastic drain on my battery life, but that could also be Samsung's weird battery drain issue on their older phones. But overall performance on this device for emulation was fantastic, and an even greater value now than it was back then, and especially if you already own this device, and considering it's just an old phone that I'm using, a lot of people might have a powerful enough phone on them or just sitting in a drawer that's old and nobody's using. You could turn it into a very powerful emulation device. And you can even plug this into docks, because some Android phones even support USB-C adapters that allow you to use stuff like external docking stations or a dongle like I've used in the past to be able to plug this into a display and use USB controllers and stuff. Set up a GameCube controller adapter and stuff like that makes it possible with these Android phones. And having a super compact and portable setup, all the better. A more modern phone you could use instead is a Samsung Galaxy S22 or an S21, which is really the newest I would recommend for just pure pricing's sake. Because if you go any newer than that, you're going to be spending quite a bit of money on a phone that is old now and that you're only using for gaming, when you could have spent that on an Odin 2 Pro or Max. You could have bought so many other emulation devices, but you chose to buy a phone. So what I'm saying is that this sort of setup really works really well when it's super cheap. If you don't have a lot of options, especially let's say you live in a country like the Philippines or somewhere in Southeast Asia, where getting imported some of these devices is incredibly difficult, especially if you're trying to get like a Steam Deck in Australia, or if you're trying to get an Odin device. Some of these devices can be very hard for people in more different regions that, simply aren't available there, So they have to sort of deal with what's, in their immediate surroundings. And sometimes a phone could be a stellar choice. And some of these newer phones are offering so much performance that even some of these emulation devices are using the same chips. For example, the Odin 2 uses the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 2, and the S21 and the S22 use the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 and 2, so depending on which phone you ended up going with. And any cell phone you could find really with those sort of specs, I would highly recommend, if that's something you have on you already, or if that's what's available to you, that's a perfectly good device to use for emulation. Now, the ultimate question is, should you buy this as an option for emulation? I would say yes and no. I say that because this could be done in so many different ways, in so many different configurations, that for some people, it might be the easiest way to get into emulation. And for some people, it could be the only way to get into emulation. Or for some people, it's just the beginning of what could become a terrible addiction. Because for me, the first time I ever started emulation and got really into this scene was through playing emulators on my brother's old Samsung tablet. And just using what you have to see if this is something you're interested in is what I would always recommend first. I usually would never recommend people first time getting into emulation to go out and buy an Odin or an Anbernic device or anything like that, just because if they end up not really doing it that often or liking it even, or if it's too much of a bore to set up or something like that, then they probably shouldn't waste the money on it. You might be served better by just having a controller attachment to your phone and installing emulators directly to it. So, depending on who you are, this could be a very cost-effective setup, especially if you don't see yourself playing very much. Or this could be the only option you have and you just don't know it. And these devices can offer a tremendous amount of power and value for a very cheap price, or zero cost to you if you already owned the device, So for what it's worth, this is a great setup and I would highly recommend it. But I just don't think it's for everybody, because once you're spending upwards of $200, $300 on getting this device and buying your controller, you might have should have bought, some other dedicated emulation device, because you might be better served that way, or might have a better overall experience for dedicated emulation. Buying a phone isn't a perfect solution, but it can be a perfect solution depending on your use case. So once again, to answer the question posited by the title of this video, should you buy an Android phone for emulation? The answer is yes and no, depending on your use case. So hopefully this video really helped you figure out, after some of the examples I gave of use cases or certain situations, that you might have come to realize a phone might be the best solution you have, and maybe saved a few phones from the eBay spend. I really hope that this video sort of helped you figure out what you should do. Just really show you another option that could be out there. So what are your thoughts? Are you going to dig out an old Android phone and start seeing what it can do? Are you going to buy a phone because of this video and you've realized that's a great option? I love to hear your thoughts down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And last but not least, a message I have to the audience. I've been so happy with how well the channel's been doing, and finally hitting 1,000 subscribers is a major milestone. I wouldn't have been able to do this without all your guys' support. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.